Hello, everybody. My name's Ed Wright, and welcome to this online iteration of the Newcastle Writers Festival. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the Awabakal people, who are the traditional owners of this country that we're actually standing on but virtually projecting from, and the elders past and present of the Awabakal people. I'm really excited to be sitting here today and talking to David Kelly, who's the author of two memoirs. The first one, Fantastic Street, and the second one, which we're going to be mainly talking about today, which came out last year through Newcastle-based publisher Puncher and Watman, and it's called State of Origin, and it's a fantastic story. Welcome, David.
Hi, Ed. Thank you for this. This is, great. Thanks.
Yeah. So State of Origin is a memoir, so it's a memoir of yours. But just thought I'd ask you, what part of your life is it about?
It's about, I suppose the areas that have always haunted me. That's what the story's about. And the areas of my life that have haunted me, which potentially aren't going to end in actual real ghosts, because I didn't know where the story was going to lead. So the story is about, I have quite a number, I have missing foster brothers. I had missing Indigenous foster brothers who were stolen generation lads. And I grew up with them until the year of 1980, and then they both ran away on the same night from a violent house, a violent family. And I never knew where they went to. I never knew up until I started writing State of Origin, and halfway through I had no idea of what had happened to either of them. So writing State of Origin was a way for me to answer those questions as to, okay, what happened to them versus me as a white subject growing up in this same family. What was their trajectory versus my trajectory? So, I wanted to, there were things like that I wanted to explore.
Oh, great. Yeah, so let's think about your family that you grew up in for a minute. And obviously you've talked about your Indigenous foster brothers, but you yourself were adopted. And then later on, your mother had biological children as well. Do you want to talk us just briefly through the structure of the family that you're writing about?
Yeah, 11 kids in total, a mix of adopted, fostered, blood, and step. So 3 adopted, 3 fostered, 3 step, 2 blood. And one adopted father, 1 stepfather, but the same mother, the same matriarch throughout the whole story, really, that we knew of or that we'd ever met. And so, that's and it started, I was adopted in 1965. I was 2 weeks old, I think, when I was adopted. So, and I was the first child that they adopted into the family. So my adopted father couldn't have children. He was physically incapable of having children, but kept that information to himself. And so my mother started adopting and fostering, and I'm not sure if some of that was in revenge for him not telling her the truth about his physical capabilities. So in a space of a few years, there were 6 kids, 3 adopted and 3 fostered. And he worked for the Queensland Railways. So, he didn't have too many sick days back in the 70s.
And that's a rapid sort of a rapid accumulation of children as well. And, you as the first, it's kind of interesting in the story how sort of, you particularly as the protagonist of the story are having to kind of constantly defend your position in the family from new interlopers.
Yes. I had to protect my turf as being the first, not the firstborn, but because 2 years after I was adopted, then the first Lindsay is fostered and brought into the family. But Lindsay is 2 years older than me, was 2 years older than me. So I was first in the family, but instantly I'm given this brand new older brother. And so that sets up a whole lot of drama around, well, who's first in the family? Is it the first in the family or is it the eldest in the family? And that led to a lot of, sibling rivalry that dominated my childhood with that brother, definitely, with Lindsay. So, yeah. Yeah, so there was a lot to explore. I wanted to focus on those energies as well, and just how myself as a subject, especially a white subject in this family, how I played that game of almost like chess. There was some real Game of Thrones moments, basically, in that whole, there was some, amongst the kids, there were Game of Thrones moments, definitely.
And you all had your kingdoms in the backyard, which are actually trees in the backyard. So everyone had their own tree, which became their place of, I suppose, of privacy if they chose, but also where they could invite other people up to join them in their trees and everything like that, which is quite a wonderful moment in the book. And I just thought around that, just to give the viewers some idea of, how wonderfully you paint this picture, if you could maybe just get you to read a little bit from it.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably read the backgrounding information that sort of sets up the story without giving too much away. And it's called On My 8th Birthday. There are 4 types of trips we take north across the Brisbane River. Pick up a baby for adoption, take delivery of a child for fostering, visit the Queensland Museum, go to the Brisbane Exhibition Grounds for the annual show called the Ekka. Otherwise, we stay south side. For Karen, Beth and me, the 3 adopted, there's no remembered before our north side pickups, no memories of mothers' smiling faces leaning down and tucking us in. It didn't happen. We draw blanks when we try to remember who our real parents are. We were newborns. The upshot of this is we can while away hours and hours imagining the true identities of our real mothers and fathers. But this has to be done in secret so our adopted mum and dad don't get upset and think we don't love them. The fostered, on the other hand, have real memories. Lindsay, if he can be bribed, tells a story of holding onto his mother's hand and being chased through the bush by something that catches them and pulls him from her, and he never sees his mother again. Until he saw the policeman, he says he thought the things chasing them were lions. On my 8th birthday, after the hip hip hoorays and the traditional birthday story of how as a newborn I had hair the colour of pumpkin, Mum's hand stops mid-slice through my birthday cake. She says she has something important to tell me. About the woman who gave you that orange-coloured mop. Mum's eyes are filled with gifts. Your birth mother. My body turns to fizz. Molly, Dad warns, are you sure he's not too young? Mum regards Dad for 2 seconds and then he's dismissed. I know her real name and one other thing. My mind turns to fizz. Now don't get too excited, Mum warns, sliding the first slice of cake in front of me, because I'll tell you all the details when you turn 18, when you're old enough. The fizz is gone. It takes all of my concentration to reach out and lever up a spoonful of cake. What if you forget? I ask, pretending not to care. I won't forget, she replies. She plates cake slices for my spellbound brothers and sisters. I've written it all down. I can't maintain the act. She is telling me to wait 10 years. The cake in my mouth turns to grit. I once saw a movie about a beautiful evil queen who chokes to death on the sand that's filling up her dead husband's pyramid. So awful was her death that I went to the library and borrowed books on ancient Egypt to find out if the story was true. I still don't exactly know, but all of a sudden I can't breathe. That's not fair, I yell, shucking out of my chair. Molly, Dad throws up his hands and leaves the table. Now see what you've done? And this is why I'm not going to tell you, David, Mum says, ignoring him. You're not old enough and you've become hysterical. But why did you say anything? I wish I hadn't, but this would have been your birth mother's job to cut your birthday cake. She must be feeling terrible right now. Please tell me a little bit more. Please, please. One thing, that's all. Just one thing, and then you must not ask me until you're 18, okay? Okay. The nurses, when they handed you over, said that there was something interesting, something out of the ordinary about your birth. Without Mum having to say another word, it's obvious. I'm the son of a movie star. I can't wait 10 years. I need to know now. While Mum does the dishes and Dad relaxes on the couch, I stretch up my arms and fake a yawn. I amble out of Mum's field of vision and wander down the carpet runner. Lindsay is the only one who's watching. 2 bedside cabinets stand like sentries on either side of the double bed. Mum's side is closest to the door. Like a trainer putting his arm into the mouth of a circus lion, I slip my forearm into the open bottom drawer and start to feel for paper objects, expecting at any moment for my hand to scrape against a rough tongue. What do you think you are doing? Mum's voice freezes the room. Looking for my birth mother? I'm your mother. The muscles in her face twitch. She gave you up. She grabs my arm and pulls me from the floor. Do you hear me? Whack. If I ever find you going through my things again, you'll get a thrashing you won't forget. Now get to your room. She pushes me out, slams the door and storms to the kitchen. Despite the humiliation of being smacked on my birthday, I can't stop thinking the information belongs to me. I will discover it another way, a secret way. If I'm the child of a movie star had to come to Australia. I'll have to find someone to ask, an adult who won't get suspicious and alert Mum.
That's terrific. Thanks, David. And, I mean, what's really curious about that sort of extract that you've just read is, you know, it's must have been such an enormous tease, you know, to sort of pose that possible solution and then withdraw it.
Yeah, definitely. But it was, it also gave me the framework to write State of Origin however many years later as well, because it was, for me, I had a lot of anxieties around writing about searching for my Indigenous foster brothers, because I was terrified of encroaching on their stories, taking their stories without any permission.
Yep.
So for me, the way I tried to handle that was the primary focus is on how I'm implicated in the politics of that family dynamic. I'm highlighting how whiteness and how privilege, which are kind of words that those words are said a lot, but for me they have, and for everyone, they have very real currency. So I had a way to actually tell the story of my whiteness, how I used that and how that was implicated and how that affected my Indigenous foster brothers. How even though we were all brought up in this sort of crazy, violent, certainly at times, but also loving, also gave me beautiful moments that, you know, I'm dealing in now. I'm dealing with those now. So, yeah, it just gave me a way to tell the story of whiteness and tell the story and show how privilege does operate, even when somebody's come from what others can consider nothing. Privilege still works in that type of environment.
Yeah. And
yeah.
certainly I can imagine that way you as a young boy fantasise about who your parents might have been. So can you talk a little bit about, sort of you finished that extract talking about how you might have, you were definitely the child of a movie star. And that doesn't work out. Who do you think you are?
Well, then it morphs into, so because there was, we each had our castles, our individual trees in the backyard, and they were sizable trees. We had a big backyard. So most of us had the ability to climb our trees. Poor Paula was given, one of my sisters was given a coffee bean tree, so you can't really climb a coffee bean tree, so she just had to make a nest under it. But the rest of us, we could climb up into the branches of the trees. So, and kids' imaginations are such that it's so easy to turn a climbable tree into a castle, into a ship, into a spacecraft. It's just so easy. So for me, I guess a lot of what informed my imagination was midday television. And a lot of midday television movies were Robin Hood or The Romanovs was a movie that I saw, and I think it was some show about the Romanovs, and so I just sort of borrowed what I saw. So we were either, typical cowboys and Indian stories, or we were Robin Hood and Maid Marian, or we were the Romanovs, and I seized upon the Romanov story because it fed my imagination, and we had Anastasia who was missing. So for me, it was just an easy joining of the dots. Anastasia is my missing grandmother or my missing great-grandmother. So I just had to then find a way to link her disappearance from the assassination of her family and lead that to, well, how would she have gotten to Australia? Well, she was chased by the Russians, her Russian assassins, and she had to basically give up my mother, who then had to give me up because she had to stick with Anastasia. So it was very complicated and very convoluted. But, children's minds can do anything with the story, basically, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes across in your book that there's a real warmth in a lot of the experiences that you had in your childhood, but not all of them, obviously. And one of the great sort of switches in the book is the arrival of Ron, your eventual stepfather, on the scene. And, you talk about that, and you've talked about the white privilege of it. Can you tell a little bit about how Ron changed the dynamics of your family?
Violently. In all sorts of every conceivable violence, actually. And it probably, I'm not sure what it did to my imagination. I'm not sure if being a writer, I can actually link it back to that sort of violent severing from one home environment where we left my father after he'd gone to work and then moved to the other side of the city. And so from that moment of severance from one family home to a completely different house that wasn't a home, wasn't the home that I knew, and without my tree where I built so many different lives, it didn't take very long at all for me to pedestalise that home in Ipswich, to wrap it in cotton wool, all my memories of that time, to sort of basically pour tree sap over it and turn it into amber each time I'd polish it and look at it and think about it and wish to be back there. I think that sort of, So I guess what I'm trying to say is if that sort of stuff hadn't happened with my stepfather, I would have grown up from a lot of that sort of stuff. I wouldn't have turned it into the treasures that I turned it into, because after we left Ipswich and my first father, I didn't have very many treasures. I didn't have very many treasures left except for those early memories. So you play with what you've got, basically.
Yeah, oh, that's really interesting. But certainly for your foster brothers, the arrival of Ron was a far more physically brutal experience, and obviously, there was some sort of racial or racist attitude involved there.
I'm not sure about. Yes, definitely language, but it was more, I think. He saw, so in terms of whiteness and privilege, for example, so I'd be punched, I'd be kicked, but they'd be attacked with planks of wood. So there's that. I'm privileged to just be kicked and punched. They, because they're the older, probably smarter, more switched on to other things that were going on in the house. Maybe he just had to get rid of them. And also my foster brothers were getting bigger, so there was a potential for them to get to a point where they could physically have come for him, so he had to sort of get rid of them. I don't know what the rationale behind his violence to them, but it had the desired effect, and they ran away on the same. And the boys, they're half-brothers, true half-brothers, but they'd never gotten on really either, because Errol was much more personable than Lindsay in a way. And so Errol had found a way to sort of sidestep the hierarchy, and everyone loved Errol. Everyone loved Lindsay, but Lindsay just didn't have the same sort of personality, I suppose. So they didn't particularly get on at all. So even though they ran away on the same night, they didn't run away together. They ran away up the same street in the middle of the night. I watched them from my bedroom window. Errol had invited me to go with him. And that's one of my greatest regrets, that I didn't go with him. But I knew I'd be better off staying. But they ran away on opposite sides of the streets, not talking, but just on opposite sides of the streets, running away. So I guess as violent and awful as that was, and they were thrust out into a world as young teenage boys, and God only knows what that could have set them up for, which I didn't know. It got them out of that house. It got them away from this, our stepfather. So I think.
And how long after that was it before you started looking for them?
Well, so I fled Queensland as soon as I could, basically, because it was a Joh Bjelke-Petersen time frame. So, and also it was HIV, AIDS was beginning, and in Queensland there were draconian laws introduced that gay men couldn't congregate in pubs, or they could face arrest. There were police raids. There was it was pretty well everywhere, that type of stuff. It was also in New South Wales, but being gay was legal in New South Wales. It was illegal in Queensland. So anyone who reached a certain age got the hell out of Queensland. So I got the hell out of Queensland. But every time I went back, I would look for my brothers, whether it was from just walking around the city or because in those days, you didn't catch a plane to go back to Brisbane. It was the overnight bus from Central Train Station. So, as soon as the train hit the outskirts of Brisbane, or the bus hit the Greyhound bus, or I think the cheapest bus line then was, what was the cheapest bus line? Doesn't matter. McCafferty's, I think. Olympic was the cheapest. So I'd always keep an eye on the window to see if I could see either of them. And also there was no internet, so finding anyone was impossible, really.
Were there any clues in those intervening years about where they might be?
I'm just trying to remember. I think my mother saw Errol at the Cleveland Strawberry Festival one year, and they hugged. But I knew he must have still been in Queensland, but I had no other detail because my mother would have been at the Cleveland Strawberry Festival with her second husband. So I can't imagine Errol would have stuck around too long to tell her what was going on in his life. But I knew he was alive, or I thought he would be alive. So, but you couldn't approach any sort of government organisation and get detail about somebody.
And as a like, I suppose a foster brother, effectively you are. When you begin to look for him in a serious way, like the book begins with you ringing the Murgon police station, and there's a problem there of how can you justify making that call? What is your, and this becomes one of the central questions of the book, what is your right to seek this person, and who do you have the right for other people to give you information about him?
Yeah, definitely. And how much water can go under the bridge before what you consider relationship to actually not be that relationship at all, and actually not even a relationship. So my heart was always telling me, yes, he's your foster brother, and a lot of the time I would just conveniently even leave off the word foster. In my heart it would be, yes, he's your brother. But he's stolen generation. He's not my brother. He was a baby stolen from his mother's bosom and put into foster care, and somebody then came along after a number of years and fostered him. Same with Lindsay. So he was stolen goods. And it's that sort of interesting thing around stolen goods. If you buy stolen goods, even if you're not even particularly aware of who they're stolen from, but you don't even have to have an idea whether it's stolen goods. And we are talking about human beings here as chattel. You're still guilty of something. So the fact, just swallowing that, the government line, the hook, line and sinker, that we're going to give these people better opportunities. But beneath all of that, and my mother knew it because we talked over the years around it, that these were children taken from mothers and fathers. Yeah, taken from communities. My mother knew that. And ironically, my mother knew that. And all she ever wanted in life was to give birth to her own children. So you had, on the one hand, my mother who'd married my father without knowing the detail of the fact he couldn't give birth to the proper game, if that's the word. But on the other hand, taking these stolen kids and putting them in our family, there's that sort of stuff. It pays to investigate that type of stuff, because it's a minutiae of the of those types of relationship, which I think really highlight the issues at the heart of all of this sort of stuff. Like, what was really going on? Because neither of my foster brothers recovered. Neither of them did. And you could say the same for, myself, my other sisters, two sisters who were adopted. I'm sure there's issues there too, from having been adopted, given up, or whatever those stories are. I haven't ever investigated my own story like that. But on the scale of things, those stolen generation kids, that story is so much worse, because Lindsay did have that story. He was chased down. And ripped from his arm. So,
and I mean, at the end of the towards the end of the book, there's a reunion with Errol. How do you think both you and he felt around that, and also your sister who was there as well?
I think it was. Well, it was profoundly moving. And the politics aside around who is who in any of these relationships was put on a back burner because it was an emotional time. So the emotional implications of having these people brought back together into the same backyard for a barbecue, where the entire family were together to reconnect with Errol. The politics of that was put aside for a while, and it was just emotional. So, and it was funny, and it was heart-rendering, it was heart. It was an incredible moment, but it also sort of marked something of an end for me around, okay, what happened in my family? What happened to this person? We found out what happened to that person. So I'm just pleased that, Errol's still around and still alive, and he's healthy, and he's gone on and he's had a family of his own. I love that. He survived. He's got children. He managed to survive. He's alive now. He had children. So he's a victor.
Yeah, and sadly, I mean, it's not really within the scope of this particular book, but you have told me afterwards that the same thing can't be said for Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay, and that's another aspect to that whole stolen generation story, which people don't realise how the tentacles of those actions, how far they stretch. So I stopped my looking for Lindsay in terms of state of origin, because I wasn't sure, I wasn't 100%, but had been given some information that there was some mental health issues going on. So I thought, okay, no, certainly have no right to go investigating and documenting, finding somebody who
may not want to be found.
Yeah, because he'd changed his name in very interesting ways, so it sort of indicated that perhaps he didn't want to be found. So I set that aside, thinking, I'll come back to that later. I'll find Lindsay later. And so when I found Errol was of the opinion that he sort of knew where Lindsay sort of was in the world. He was in Queensland still, but he had not personally seen him for a very long time. And then when State of Origin came out last year in August, so I had the book launch. We had the book launch and you launched it. I'd sent a copy of State of Origin to Errol and said, yay, the book's out. And had he heard anything from Lindsay? And he told me that he'd only recently found out himself that Lindsay had passed away in 2014. Oh. So the book was released in 2019, and one of my foster brothers had died 5 years previously, and none of us had known. What other family does that take place in?
I mean, it's a real tragedy. And, to not know what happens, to lose your siblings in that way.
Yeah.
Is a real tragedy. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, David. But sure. Thank you for chatting today. It's a wonderful book. It's warm, it's wise, but it's also cognizant of the tragedies and the injustices that have been perpetuated structurally in Australian society for some time. And it's a really great read, everyone. It's available at all good bookshops or through Punter and Watman online, and I can heartily recommend it. Thanks very much for coming on today, David.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Take care.
Okay.